This is a Clutch Picks Sports Betting Podcast, Week 10 NFL Picks. My name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined by the Scores Lead betting analyst, Mr. Matt Russell. And I got to say, you know what? I'm maintaining the high vibes, I talked about the wave for the whole season. Keep preaching the wave because you got to understand it's up and down. It's up and down. And right now, I'm trying to climb my way back up. Last week, another tough week, but we grind out and we finish off with another sub 500 week.
Oh, okay.
6-8 week. But you know what? We keep the vibes high. We keep pushing forward because we know that we're going to finish strong on the year. And I want to use this as an example because last week is a football week. And I know I'm going off a little here, off at the beginning here, but it was a football week because I actually looked up as I was watching the end of the Houston Texans game. And you're battling to get an over 500 week. And you have the Texans favored by 2.5 points. And you've watched their kicker go down. And you've watched them consistently go for 2 and fail. And then you finally watch them go for a field goal with their running back who makes said field goal. And you're thinking, you know what? I might actually get something to bounce my way today. Kickers, he's running off calm and cool. I'm like, all right, we got something here. Then they score a touchdown at the end of the game. And I'm thinking, whoa, they're going to cover this? This is incredible. And then I notice, wait, are they going for 2? Why are they going for 2? Mm-hmm. They're up by 2 points. This makes no sense. Wait, they're going to kneel? What's happening right now? And after that split second of, I have them by 2.5, they're winning by 2, and they're going to kneel with seconds left on the clock to not cover. I just thought, you know what? I can't be mad at that.
No,
that's just football being football. And that's why we ride on into the next week. We're happy because there's another week to fight another day. And I say all that in my long-winded introduction to you, Mr. Matt Russell. How are you feeling heading into week 10 of the NFL season?
I'm all right.
I know I gave you a lot there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot to work with there, but I think it's worth discussing. 6-8 is not bad. I went 6-8 last week. I don't know if we necessarily had the exact same picks. Did you have Dallas +3?
I did.
Yeah. So, think about those two games, right? Where, you're going to be hard-pressed to tell me that Dallas +3 wasn't the right side in that Philadelphia game, right? And obviously circumstances, right? Whether it's, goal line, situation, Dak incapable.
Dak, just being Dak.
Just one of the least athletic things I think I've ever seen from a guy who's very athletic. I'm not saying Dak's not, unathletic. I'm saying that was, really one of the least athletic things I've ever seen on a football field from a guy that you hate to be screen capture guy, but you screen capture that one and you're like, how does this dude not get to the end zone? Because honestly, I watch a lot of football and I watch a lot of guys who are really good at diving for the pylon. And you're like, oh, he had to have been out of bounds. And you're like, nope, that guy wasn't out of bounds. Whereas Dak, you're like, well, he had to have been in. And you're like, nope, he somehow was out of bounds. So I'm kind of getting away from the point here. But if you take those two games where Houston, you're sitting there going yeah, I think Houston's going to win. The line's 2.5. Why would I, I'm not going to take the money line necessarily, and I'm certainly not going to take the Buccaneers. But the only sort of pushback element that I will sort of say is, for one, it's worth mentioning that is the absolutely right play to grab the ball and kneel it. And I know you're not saying that it isn't. I was at least sort of intrigued by the idea. And again, the point of them kneeling down is because I think there was 6 seconds left, but kind of anything under 10 seconds, that the other team's not going to be able to line up for a field goal, right? They're never going to get to a point where the ball is inside of a field goal range. If you're going to lose, you're going to lose by a miracle touchdown situation, whether that's off of a line of scrimmage play or off of the kickoff, right? So that the only thing that you can screw up at this point is a fumble, interception, or block kick being returned for 2 points if you go for the 2-point conversion. The one thing I did think of, though, because you see all these dumb coaches, and that's the sort of the fundamental thing that gets me angry on a week-to-week basis, is 80% of the coaches there don't know that you're supposed to kneel it out. We saw Ryan Day do that in college football in a pretty prominent game when Ohio State beat Notre Dame in a very similar situation where he just went and firing off extra points. It's yeah, you got away with it because, yeah, they're probably not going to block that kick, or you're probably going to be able to execute that to even just get that off. Because, again, you don't have to make the kick. You just have to kick the kick. But there was a penalty on Tampa Bay. And they could have not just gone for it from the 2.5 yard line. They could have gone for it from the 1 yard line. So the part of me where I was like, man, maybe, because half of these coaches are so new, you don't really know their history. I'm like, maybe D'Amico Ryans is so dumb that he's going to just be like, yeah, let's put it on the 1. And because we've been going for it for 2-3 times because they had to, maybe we'll just run this thing in. And that's the one thing that kept my hopes up, because as I'm watching that entire drive, I'm realizing that unless this happens, a lot quicker than it's happening, it needs to happen sort of with 20 seconds left. Once we kind of hit the 15-second mark, it was like, oh, okay, well, it doesn't matter right now if the Texans score or not. We're not going to be able to get the cover. Effectively, that cover died when Baker Mayfield went down the field on Houston. And that's the thing, that if you're going to be mad
we'll get to Baker.
Like, that's the disappointing part. So the kicking thing, it's like they were 1 out of 3 on 2-point conversions. So out of an expected 3 points that they're supposed to get on PATs, they got 2 of them. So it's like, okay, well, there was a lost point there. But what I haven't heard anybody really mention is that they got a Dalton Schultz touchdown on 4th and 8 when they was, when they would have normally gone for a field goal there. So they got 4 extra points right there because of that whole deal. So effectively getting, kind of netting 3 extra points than they normally would have if they had just done had a kicker and just done the conservative thing over and over and over again. So, you kind of rework the math that way. And obviously maybe some game script gets a little bit changed along the way there. So yeah, it wasn't, oh, the kicker got hurt, we didn't cover. It was honestly, it was a defensive issue, right? And when your quarterback throws for 470 yards, you should probably cover 2.5 pretty comfortably. So I wouldn't beat yourself up about a 6-8 record. That probably could have and should have been 8-6.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm just waiting for the wave to come back in my direction where the football stuff goes in my favor. That's all. That's all.
Oh,
and
yeah,
maybe
listen,
week 10's that time. Let's go, right?
It's November 8th, and I'm sitting here waiting to get like a defensive or special teams touchdown to go my way in both college and the NFL. Like, I know this is like the type of thing that like everybody complains about, like, oh, I never get this. Outside of Steelers games, which like I bet on the Steelers and they manage to get defensive touchdowns like more than half the time. Honest to God, every Saturday, Sunday, it's just getting pummeled with punt returns and fumbles and all that kind of stuff where you're just like, there's no way to track it because I bet on so many games over the course of the year. And like, I'm not tracking every single score and this, that, or whatever. So like, you're just going to have to take my word on this. It's just outrageous, the amount of, and I'm still like head above water. Like, I'm still profitable for the season. And I'm like, oh my God, I'd be so rich if just defensive and special teams touchdowns just evened out. So maybe for the last couple of months this season, we're getting an avalanche of defensive and special teams touchdowns to go our way. But, somehow I doubt that. So
game plan for this season: start strong, finish strong. That's the goal here. That's the goal here.
And just week get 10. Lucky, which you can't control. You just can't.
Week 10 of the NFL, but that's why we love it so much too. Like, that's how the NFL keeps sucking me back in, because you know why? 2 days later, there's more games on the way, and even though it's Panthers Bears, I'm still gonna be there picking one side or the next, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, week 10 NFL season, we got 4 teams on the bye: Chiefs, Rams, Dolphins, and Eagles. Some heavy hitters there, which means that we got some pretty not so heavy hitters around as well. So we'll start on Thursday Night Football. As always, we have on Thursday night the Panthers at the Bears. And I did a double take there because I wasn't sure. I looked at something and I was like, wait, is that right? No, it is actually right. The Panthers at the Bears are a primetime game. Why? I don't know. But all of the games that are in their own separate window are not very good this week.
Yeah.
But we will all be watching together. Or I might advise you to just make your pick. And then, you know what? Maybe have a movie night. Maybe have a date night. Maybe go, get some Christmas shopping. Early start on Christmas shopping or something. I don't know.
We're not going to do that, though.
No, I'm going to be right there on my couch watching the Panthers and the Bears. Bears at home, favored by 4 points. Short week for 2 bad teams. One of them laying more than a field goal. So my early lean is to take the points in this situation, because I'm struggling to realize a life in which I can take the Bears by more than a field goal against anyone. So my question to you is 2 things. Who's going to be the starting quarterback for the Bears?
Yeah.
Is it Justin Fields or not? How much does that matter? And where do the Panthers qualify on our scale of versus anyone?
Yeah, right. No, that's a really good point. Okay, so we'll get to both those questions in a second here, but hold up. I'm going to cook. I want to talk about the NFL in general because I have this thing that I need to get off my chest. And the Bears, this game and it being in prime time and the Bears' general existence and what happened in the Bears game against the Saints is actually sort of the jumping off point for this because we watch, I hope most of the people on here who listen, they're probably watching a lot of games, right? And maybe they're just a red zone guy. And honestly, the proliferation of red zone culture in the NFL is brutal because all that we see, right, is fantasy points, touchdowns, and essentially all the good stuff. But if you're sitting there like I am with 5 screens every Saturday and every Sunday, and particularly every Sunday, because listen, college football, like there's an expectation of kind of general malfeasance in college football. Like the expectations for quality are generally low, except for when you get a game like a USC Washington or an Alabama LSU, and you're just like, wow, like this is really, really fun. These guys are awesome. Like it's not getting marred by a bunch of nonsense. Then you flip on the NFL, and in the morning you get honestly a really underwhelming Miami-Kansas City game, but because it's Miami and because it's Kansas City, like it is just compelling whether or not one team gets a 3 touchdown lead or not, right? Because it's the NFL and these are sort of 2 of the top teams and we're expecting to maybe see a playoff rematch come January. And then you sit and you watch the selection, the smorgasbord of games over the course of Sunday, all 5, 5 games at a time, flipping around to the other sort of games. And honestly, like Cleveland and Arizona, not even a real football game. So it's like the good news is you can just like remove that entirely from your board. But like, what if we were forced to watch that game? Right? What if that was a Thursday night game? What if that was a Sunday night game? Right? But it's like, no, we get to ignore that game ever happened. We get to ignore that game exists. Along with, honestly, 4 of the other 6 games where there was just absolute nonsense across the board. And then you can kind of focus in on the best one. And so like we sit there, by the time Philadelphia and Dallas rolls around, everybody's talking about like, what a classic. What a great game. And I'm just like, are you watching the same product that I'm watching? Because this is actually awful. And I realize these 2 teams are 2 of the better teams, but they were wildly disappointing in how they played that game, how that game is officiated, how that game was coached, right? And so every week it almost is sort of like a rotating thing of like, what's the worst? Is it the officials this week? Is it the coaching this week? Is it the players this week? Sometimes it's kicker week where none of the kickers can make a kick. We haven't had kicker week yet. So just in case you're, ready or you're not ready, there might be just a flurry of missed kicks this weekend. Why? Just randomness, right? Everybody complains about the tush push being a thing. And you know what the NFL does secretly so that nobody will notice because it'll never be on red zone. But every time a team lines up for a tush push, what happens? A call that has never been called prior to basically last week, offensive offside. Offensive offside was not a thing. False start is a thing. Illegal motion is a thing, et cetera, right? Illegal formation is a thing. But all of a sudden, on 4th and 1s or 3 and 1s only, offensive offside is a thing. And every time it's called, because apparently the guard's head is a little bit too far, right? Over the ball, because all these teams who are trying to do the tush push thing have told their guards, you need to be closer to the defensive lineman. That the officials go, nope, that's illegal. Boom, sorry, you're bumped back to 4th and 6 or 3rd and 6. And that's how the NFL has gotten rid of the tush push, except Philadelphia is still the only team who can do it for the reasons that we've always mentioned up to this point. Jalen Hurts squats 1 billion pounds, right? He can move the pile as much as the offensive lineman can, right? And so the NFL is trying to sort of screw everybody back into place here by not doing this. But I'm watching these games and everybody's like thrilled about the Dallas-Philadelphia game. I'm like, the game that nobody wanted to win, like I understand that's entertaining in a technical way, but those entertaining games are supposed to be Minnesota-Atlanta, right? Washington, New England, the dregs, right? Those are supposed to be entertaining because of the ineptitude and the inability of anybody to actually make a play, make a call, or, have any sort of strategy, correct strategy, right? Dak Prescott's getting lauded. Even your man, Stephen A. Smith, is praising Dak Prescott. I'm like, did you watch the same game that I did? Like, oh, he didn't throw an interception? Is that what you're telling me? Cool. But like, maybe throw the ball into the end zone on 4th down. maybe, as we mentioned, like get the ball inside the pylon. Like that was a garbage football game that just happened to be close. And after watching 10 other games for 7 hours, like we're like these depraved, like prisoners that are being just given food at that point. We're just like, yeah, like I'll eat it all up, right? And then it's like, oh, Cincinnati Buffalo, that's going to be exciting. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the one bomb thrown deep, like, was nowhere near, completed to Jamar Chase and, like, almost got him hurt. And all these other plays, and again, the same kind of stuff pops up. But the thing that I want to sort of mention here is sometimes this is even as bad as broadcasting. And this is a deep pull, but in the Saints-Bears game, there was a play, Tyson Bagent takes off. And this is why this is important for this game, or at least sort of a jumping off point for this game. Tyson Bagent takes off and he goes running for the first down mark. I believe it was on 4th down. And he stretches out and he reaches, and it's pretty clear that he reaches the ball on the sideline at the first down mark. And the lines person comes in and she grabs the ball and she marks him like a full 1.5 yards backwards. And it's like, oh, we're going to have to take a look at this because that is not where the ball was. She's at a bad angle. And honestly, like gender doesn't necessarily matter here. So I'll just keep calling, the people, the lines person here. So the lines person is at a bad angle and can't sort of see necessarily. And then the guy who's further down, right? And because nobody is on the first down line, because that would make too much sense for somebody to be standing on the first down line. The guy who's 10 yards downfield, the official, he comes running in. And he's talking to her and he's like, I really got to tell you, I think that spot is a lot further on. And so they're just discussing it. And it's clear as day. You can go back and watch the replay. I believe it was in the 4th quarter.
I saw it. I was watching.
And
somehow.
He comes in.
Why was I watching that?
Well, because the cover was in doubt, right? It was one of like 3 games where the cover was in doubt late. And like we had a pretty significant position on the Bears, or at least I certainly did. And I was hoping they were going to pull the game out, right? The win outright. And so he comes in, they have the conversation, and she takes the ball and she moves the ball ahead to the first down mark. And the broadcast, who's been watching this whole thing the same way that I have, along with 4 other games from my couch at home, the broadcast goes, what a great play. And they start calling her by name. And it's all just like this uplifting thing. What a great play by Maya to like, see the spot was wrong and change the spot and have like the 4th. It's like she screwed the spot up. And he comes in and tells her that she messed the spot up. And she grabs the ball and respots it because, like, I don't know, I guess that's her responsibility with regards to like the mechanics of the officials. But it's like she didn't overrule him. Like, what are you people watching at this point? And so the point is that even if the broadcasters who are focused and locked in on one game can't even describe to you the things that are happening in the game, like what is the expectation for any of this stuff, the quality of any of this stuff? Because the coaches are making mistakes. We don't even trust D'Amico Ryans to go for 2. We're surprised when he correctly does it. Like, how sad is that, right? We can't believe that CJ Stroud as a rookie would throw for 470 yards because we can't fathom any other quarterback basically doing it in this day and age. Unders are hitting at like 62%. Al Michaels is checked out for Thursday night games. That guy doesn't care. Like, the product is horrendous. And we haven't even gotten to like the Chargers Jets game on Monday night. And so all that is to say, like, yes, man, +4, your point is correct. Carolina, Chicago, all these 2 teams are basically the same, except for one of them just happens to be like slightly more competitive on like a week-to-week basis. And the idea that Justin Fields comes in and like this line should be about, based on the spreads from last week, right? With Tyson Bagent, who, by the way, Tyson Bagent would be a really good quarterback, except for he's missing 2 fundamental skills, arm strength and accuracy. Other than that, Tyson Bagent is actually a very good quarterback, but in the NFL, unfortunately, those 2 things are pretty important. I know that sounds like I'm making fun of him. No. He just can't throw the ball deep, and he can't throw the ball accurately with any sort of velocity. He can get into plays. He knows where the ball's supposed to go. He can scramble out of the pocket. He can get first downs. He actually knows where the first down marker is before he slides, which honestly, at this point, I don't know that 70% of guys can even do that. I'm willing to bet that based on the fact that he was able to get that first down on that one play, he'd probably be able to get the ball inside the pylon, which is something more advanced than what 6-year veteran Dak Prescott can do. So the point is like he's probably good enough to quarterback this honestly pretty bad Bears team. And I don't know that Justin Fields is any real better than him. And the fact that this line, as Justin Fields like theoretically gets healthier over the course of this week and it gets closer to him playing, that's what's seen this line go from 3 to 3.5, and now up to 4 in most places, because it's like he's like seconds away. And honestly, by the time you listen to this, he's probably going to be ruled in, or at least that's the indication of this line. So if you are listening to this, or hopefully you got to this earlier, like Carolina +4 is good enough for me, because even if this goes up to 4.5 or 5, you're not necessarily losing anything. And if for, I shouldn't say for some reason, if the reason is that Justin Fields isn't ready to fully grip a football and can't play this week, then this line is going to be headed back underneath a field goal. And obviously there's a ton of value from that standpoint, right? So like the point is this should be about 1.5 with Bagent, or based on the lines that we saw from last week. And listen, Carolina got smoked. Bryce Young's not very good. Obviously, nobody else. Listen, half the league isn't very good. Throws 2, pick sixes. I thought the defense was pretty good against with the Panthers. So you're going to get one of these crappy, low-scoring games. Shocker. I mean, what are totals right now in primetime games this season? Like basically undefeated almost at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get, points are going to be at a premium. Neither team's particularly any good at scoring. It's going to come down to randomness, stupid coach move, ball bouncing the correct way. Speaking of the Chargers on Monday, just getting every bounce imaginable for the first quarter of that game. And it's like, yeah, and you're just going to be like, yeah, I don't know, I'm either 1-0 or 0-1 to start. But as we always do, right? We're just trying to get the best of the number. Once we've hit 4 here, the difference between 4, 4.5, 5, not really all that important. And if you're telling me that Justin Fields is going to bump this line all the way up to 6, guess what? I'm going to bet it again. So Carolina +4 is certainly the bet. And then maybe again, if it happens to get to 6, that's fine. If it drops down underneath 3, by the way, and maybe it gets down to like a pick'em type situation or a -1, probably bet the Bears and try to middle the game and just sit there and hope this ends on a field goal and hopefully no kicker gets hurt.
Right. Yeah, totally. Panthers +4 there. Interesting one to see. Thursday night football. I might be watching the NBA that night. I can't lie to you, my dude.
Wouldn't blame you.
We switch gears here, and I'll definitely be tuning into this because Debo should be back here for my Niners, as they are 3-point favorites in Jacksonville against the Jags. Debo should be back. Trent Williams, not really sure yet, but we do know that the offense did not look the same ever since Debo was not involved. And it's not so much about Debo himself, but it's just about where all the other pieces fit into that Niners offense. So we're interested to see that, right? Niners also coming off a bye. Shanahan, good coach, getting a bye week, maybe get to settle down some of the noise with your boy Brock Purdy and all that. I don't know. I like the Niners here. The Jags in this game, the Jags have been playing well. They have been playing really well. But I feel like this is a game where the numbers might dictate that I should be taking the home dog Jags, but I don't think the Jags are as good as the Niners at full strength. So I'm okay with the number being at 3. It's not over a field goal. So I'll take the 3 with the Niners laying 3 points on the road, fresh off a bye week. I like that.
Yeah, so as we sort of talk about in the form of like ratings, right, to sort of understand, because you obviously mentioned like you think the 49ers are better than the Jags. I'm like, well, yeah, obviously. Part of the thing, right, as the 49ers rating has kind of slowly crept down.
Mhm.
And this is kind of like the mini version of Joe Burrow and the Bengals, where it's like, is the rating moving down because of the play on the field, or is the rating moving down because the play on the field relative to circumstance is a problem, but that circumstance is about to change? And so Debo's already said that he's coming back, right? The assumption is that Trent Williams is coming back. Brock Purdy, I don't know what the deal was with that, the whole concussion. Does he have a concussion? Does he not have a concussion? Whatever. But after a full 2 weeks and him obviously playing in that game, like I think we can say that hopefully any sort of idea of him having a concussion or any sort of lingering effects of a concussion that, by the way, probably kept him out of a certain degree of practice that week are probably gone. Throw in a third straight loss off of a bye week. All of the sort of recipe is there. I always rather play a team, who's coming out of a bye week. I'd rather play that team to kind of be the opposite of where they were when they came in, right? So if you go in playing really well like the Jaguars, like you probably don't really want a bye week. And when you go in playing kind of poorly, or obviously a lot of that being circumstance like the 49ers, like you probably could use the bye week, especially if health is the issue, right? Yeah. So this number is actually pretty fair because obviously it indicates the 49ers being on the road are the better team because they are favored on the road. Now, is this some road environment where you're like, oh man, it's going to be overwhelming for the old 49ers? Like, it's not Cleveland in gale force winds, right? This isn't indoors against the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell at his absolute peak. this is, a pretty hungry 49ers team that's like, I don't want to say they have to win this game because that's certainly not the case, but like they're probably feeling like they have to, right? Within the building. Whereas the Jags, like they look around and they go like, yeah, still not afraid of the Texans. And nor are we afraid of the Colts, right? And again, like we always kind of talk about this, and like maybe we'll just keep losing when the Jags pull off victories against like the Steelers and the Saints of the world, which are somehow giving them credit to sort of be within a field goal here of the 49ers. It's like, no, this is weight class, man. And I think and this doesn't necessarily kind of involve the Jaguars, because I think the Jaguars are probably too good for where I'm looking to kind of play the mismatch types, this season, where there's kind of creating a divide here, and the Jags are kind of at the bottom end of the top tier because there's not really any mediocre average teams right now, right? Like it's kind of separating where it's like you're either kind of good or you're kind of bad. And like even the teams that we thought might be kind of average, and it's funny, like the Steelers are kind of blowing that out of the water, where like I think they're a below average team. They just kind of keep winning, right?
Seahawks.
Well, you know what? And I think the Seahawks are like that one team that are kind of like could go either way still, right? From a rating perspective, I have them at a 52.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. Well, trust me, we're gonna get there. But like, so normally in this case where it's like, well, if you just divide these teams into tiers and you have a top tier and a bottom tier, normally I would want to take the points with kind of anybody sharing a tier, right? So like if you're in the top tier against the top tier, just give me the points. If you're in the bottom tier against the bottom tier, just give me the points, kind of like how we just discussed with Thursday. It's just the circumstance here with the 49ers, right? And and I think sometimes 49ers, like fans like yourself, like you got to be watching the 49ers like when they're good, and then watching other teams play and just being like, my team is so much better than this. And it must come as a surprise when they lose games, because it's like, I know it sort of feels like the 49ers played bad against the Browns or the Vikings or even the Bengals. But honestly, I thought they played pretty well. They just, sometimes you play teams that are like literally playing to the top of their range, Bengals, Vikings, and there's just some sort of other weird circumstance like the Browns, right? Like, I don't think they were playing that badly. The 49ers, I still think, are maybe the best team in the league along with the Chiefs. So anytime they play quote unquote badly, like it never looks as bad as some of these other teams when it looks bad for them.
Yeah, and I think it's having the understanding of what the team is too, right? Like we weren't riding the wave of when, the whole ESPN hype machine of, is Brock Purdy, could he be in the MVP race? Like that stupid take. So when that goes AWOL and goes crazy, and then the flip side happens and it's like, is Brock Purdy one of the worst quarterbacks in the league? It's like, no, it's right. Yeah. It's just neither. It's just he's solid. They have a really good coach, and you have all these pieces, these offensive weapons that give you mismatches, and Shanahan's good at picking on the mismatch. And when you remove one of those pieces, it's not going to be as good. I don't know. It didn't seem that complicated to me, but again, this is what goes back to what you're saying earlier about the red zone culture, right? And like watching actual games, and I'm not bragging about watching my favorite team play. Right. What I'm saying is having the understanding of, what's going on with the team versus, okay, they've lost 3 in a row. Is it time to panic? Is it time to do we think about bringing in Sam Darnold?
Right.
No, right. So, Niners -3.
That would be so much fun. That would be so interesting to watch Sam Darnold. And that's certainly not a good
thing. Yeah. I know what you're saying. No. I know what you're saying.
I'm just saying, like, I want to know what the drop off is.
It's like, could Sam Darnold perform in Kyle Shanahan's offense? Yeah. Because I'll be honest with you. I have faith that with most quarterbacks, I'm like, I think that's what Brock Purdy is.
Well, Jimmy, your guy Jimmy G failing miserably in Las Vegas doesn't really help the Brock Purdy argument, because it's always Jimmy G went to the Super Bowl, right, with the 49ers. And like Jared Goff succeeding with the Lions, like it's like, yeah, he went to the Super Bowl with the Rams and now he's succeeding with the Lions. And you're like, the Lions are just, or at least when he got there, were just as disheveled and a mess as the Raiders were, right? And obviously you get bring in a way better coach, then like things are going to probably go a little bit better. But right, like just the idea that like Jimmy G was at least functional and got them to the playoffs and deep into the playoffs, et cetera, and then gets to like anywhere else essentially, which, speaking of your defining anywhere or any team, like it just completely is just absolute, garbage. You're just like, God, maybe Sam Darnold could make it work. And so I'm like, I just want to see Sam Darnold one time, but it doesn't look like we're going to get, all right, well, listen, we're not going to get that this week, knock on wood. And, who knows going into the future, like hopefully Brock Purdy can stay upright here, because the 49ers are a lot more interesting long-term with him in there. But for the short term, man, I would love to see Sam Darnold just to see.
Niners -3. That's the pick. That's the bet. There's another big game, or interesting game, I will say. You got the Browns at the Ravens. Ravens at home laying 6 points. Got to be honest here. I'm leaning on the Browns +6. I understand the Ravens hype train. It's in full swing right now, and I get it. The Browns, the Ravens getting a big win versus Geno and the Seahawks, which, as mentioned, we will get to. I totally understand it. Ravens are looking really good, but I got to be honest. I feel like that my pick here, my lean towards taking the points, is more so based on the fact that the Ravens, I feel like every time they kind of read their headlines a little too much, like they win a game, that's kind of when things go the other way. And I feel like 6 points is a lot for me to take or lay, pardon me, with the Ravens in a divisional game against a really, really good defense. And I've seen Lamar struggle against before. 6 points is just a lot here. And the only thing that makes me question this is the everlasting question of, what is Deshaun Watson doing? That's the only thing that has me nervous about being on the side of the Browns. But I will say my lean is Browns +6 in this one, just because it's a divisional game. Browns defense, I feel like, can keep it close. Lamar and them, they're at Odell's party this week. They're kind of feeling themselves. Not saying they lose, but 6 points is a lot for me to lay.
Yeah, this is a really tough game, because it's like,
it is
off of what we're supposed to do, right? It's like we set a range for a team. Then when the expectations, right, the average rating, if you will, for a team hits kind of the top of that range, you're supposed to sell. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did last week with the Seattle Seahawks, in Baltimore. Because the rating for the Ravens is now up in like 69, 70 range, where like once you hit 70, it's like you are in the conversation for the Super Bowl, right? Like you can win the Super Bowl as a 70, a low 70s team. That's essentially like, honestly, that's Chiefs, that's Eagles, that's 49ers, that type of stuff. And you'll remember before the season started in the preview, like I said, and I'll repeat this every time the Ravens keep winning these games, even as I fade them and lose on the point spread. I'm like, I kind of think the Ravens are like sitting on like a really, really big season, because I think the offense is going to be good, because I respect Todd Monken from Georgia. And honestly, like the defense is, turned a corner once they got Roquan Smith. And if it wasn't for all the flashy plays that Myles Garrett and TJ Watt and Micah Parsons make on a weekly basis, Roquan Smith would be a legitimate choice for Defensive Player of the Year, especially if this team ends up finishing with two or three losses, and the defense finally sort of gets the credit that they deserve. And I think that's coming with some primetime games coming up here shortly. And so, but the point is like once you get to this rating, it's like, okay, you either believe the rating or you don't believe the rating. And so if you asked me from before the season and you said, hey, Matt, like this is going to be up to like the 70s by the time week 10 rolls around, I'd be like, oh man, like I am on to something. Mm-hmm. And so I wouldn't want to sell off of a high rating of the Ravens. Yeah. I would just be like, like told you. So we were supposed to bet the Browns here, but every time we try to fade the Ravens, i.e. last week, and if you go through the point spreads with their new rating, and you kind of do a reverse engineering here, going backwards, right? The point spread for last week with the rating that the Ravens have to create this point spread, the point spread would be about 6.75, so a little bit over 6.5 against Seattle, right? So not a crazy. Yeah. So the point is this rating for them, this high rating for them, existed last week, and they surpassed it by about 1 billion points in absolutely crushing Seattle, right?
Yeah.
The week before that, Baltimore plays. If you remember it, let me know. I'm scanning.
Baltimore played.
Arizona. Yeah, Arizona. Not a real game, but at least that was the Josh Dobbs version. They get backdoor covered, but they're up 17 points with 2 minutes to go. That point
Aguilar's fault.
That point spread with this Ravens rating would be 12, right? Mm-hmm. And remember, we got it got as high as 10, and we were just sort of like, well, that's too high. Well,
Mhm.
honestly, like, is it, right? And now part of
Yeah.
that is the Cardinals number has gone down because of the fiasco that is their quarterbacking situation, or at least was until Kyler comes back. And if you keep going back, further, you're like, okay, Baltimore against, well, listen, Cleveland the first time around, that was a little bit weird, but Detroit, right? Baltimore -3. That's still a fair rating. It's just Detroit has moved up in their rating along with them because,
Mhm.
obviously winning and covering against the Raiders last week. At Tennessee, or not at Tennessee, but that was a neutral site game where the line was -5.5. The new point spread for that game, if those two teams played tomorrow in London, would be about 7.5. Well, the Ravens covered that number along with the number that they covered in London that day, right? And so the further you go back, Baltimore against Pittsburgh, Baltimore loses that game outright. But the line, if that game was played this week, would be Baltimore -5. And we already saw that game, and yeah, Pittsburgh somehow pulled that off. But like, Baltimore was considerably the better team that week, right? And
Mhm.
so, like, you can keep going further and further and further back, right? Go to the Colts. I mean, that's that last game that things really got super weird for the Ravens. And so, like, if the only thing that we're fading the Ravens off of is the Colts game still, and that's sort of scarring us. And honestly, that's going to probably scar us for a really long time, unless we get knocked out of Survivor, sort of, a second time, if you will. Then you get the problem is then you get the Browns, and I don't. And you made the point about Deshaun Watson. I don't know where the Browns are supposed to be rated, and we were supposed to get an idea of that last week when Watson comes back and plays his first full game healthy.
Yeah.
But instead, we get served up Clayton Tune and not a real team at that point. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I don't know. And by the way, it's not even like the 27 points that the Browns scored were legitimate. I'm flipping over to that game when it was still quote unquote close. And I'm watching Deshaun Watson hit a guy in the helmet, have that ball bounce 15 yards into the end zone, and still get caught by Amari Cooper for a touchdown. So it's like, that's not even a real thing. Like, even the beat down, quote unquote, against the Cardinals, like, didn't even really feel like a traditional sort of obvious beatdown, even though it was 27-0, right? Like, by the way, like 27 points or 26 points, whatever it was, against the Cardinals defense, like, man, I'm not even sure I'm like impressed by that, especially when you're getting short fields and like literally a possession like every 30 seconds. So this isn't me telling you like, oh man, we need to keep going with the Ravens here. And I see you changing the pick, and it's like, I don't want to be kind of telling you to do that. I just look at this going like, I realize I'm supposed to be betting the Browns, but like, what else do I want out of the Ravens to prove to me that they should be a team that, like, under a touchdown against a very sketchy quarterback, is something that I actually should be interested in, even though I'm supposed to be like, oh no, like they played so well. Why would I buy that? And it's like, well, because I was buying that before the season started. And I just frankly have not done a good enough job of just blindly betting the Ravens every week because of the stupid Colts game from week 3.
So the pick has been changed. The pick has been changed to the Ravens. And here's the thing. I feel like the Ravens got to know at this point, this is a game you get up for, right? Like, this is a big divisional game, and it's cool to beat all these other teams, but this is a divisional game at home. And again, I know that I was on the Browns because of the points in said divisional game. The reason I'm going to switch to the Ravens here is just because there's too much uncertainty with the Browns and Deshaun Watson. Like, he's still doing the like very weird, I'm about to get sacked, but am I going to throw the ball or fumble the ball? And, with the Ravens defense playing the way that it is, I think I like that side of it more. So the pick
Sure.
has been changed. Baltimore -6. And hey, we can play this back next week when Deshaun Watson leads them to victory in Baltimore. And no, I'm joking.
No,
I'm
I
joking.
mean,
No, it's
maybe,
football.
right?
Football.
Yeah. Like,
Football.
it's a strong maybe, right? At this point.
I like that. It's
It's
strong.
what it is. It's a strong
That's what,
maybe.
you know what? That's what the name of the pod should be. A strong maybe. Are you confident in this pick? A strong
Strong maybe.
maybe. Let's keep going here to the Lions and the Chargers. I got to be honest. I am confident in this pick. This is not as strong maybe here. Got the Lions on the road laying 2.5 points against the Chargers. Lions coming in off a bye. Chargers on a short week. I think that the Lions, the way that this team, the Lions team is built. I think of them as a physical team that is going to show up, a team that is going to, win in the trenches, all that fun stuff, versus the Chargers, who seem to be a team that is just waiting to make mistakes. And so unless the team they're playing is that bad that they cannot take advantage of said mistakes, that's how they win. If that makes sense, right? Like the Chargers have somehow limped their way to a 4-4 record. And I think that's just because they've beaten the bad teams and won convincingly, but convincingly against bad teams. Lions are a good team. Give me the points on the road. I know this is a tough spot, but I feel like with the time to prepare, I like the Lions coming in a little more fresher, we'll say. And I'll lay the 2.5 points on the road with Detroit.
Yeah, so I bet this when it opened. What do I have? -120 on the money line for Detroit.
Okay.
So, the line was like -1 or whatever, right? So it's crept up to, gosh, you said -2.5 here. Yeah. I really like the money line position on the Lions because having watched the Chargers, together far too closely the last couple of weeks, and just going like, how are they pulling this off? Because it's like, you sit there and I'm again, I didn't even mention, speaking of games that could have gone from L's to W's, right? Like I go into that game on Monday night and I'm just like, you see like the number starts to creep down a little bit to 3 and you go, okay, so like at least there's some interest in +3.5 for the Jets, which like makes me feel a lot better because I'm sitting there going like, I don't know how the Chargers cover this game, like based on what I know about the Chargers. And then you turn the game on and it's 90-yard punt return, as if like that ever happens in the NFL this day. And you just go, oh, like that's how this is going to work. Yeah. Right? In the same way, or sort of adjacent to the Sunday night game before that, where the Bears hit Darnell Mooney for a long pass and the referees just blow the play dead, even though nobody's touched him. Right? It's sort of the inverse thing where it's like, well, maybe if the Bears score on that play or on that drive, like they get a lead, which is what happened this past weekend against the Saints. And now they're in a competitive game because they can run the football and they don't have to play from behind and their crappy quarterback doesn't have to throw the ball all the time. Well, the Jets go and they give up this punt return, which if you told me one team was going to score on a punt return and the other team isn't, like, you're telling me for sure that was going to be the Chargers and not the Jets? Like, I would have been like, no, everything I've seen from the Chargers for the last 30 years would indicate that the Jets are probably going to get that punt return for a touchdown, right? And then, okay, it's just 7-0. Like, they're still into this. And it's like Garrett Wilson, who's allegedly the best player on the team, like, just brazen fumble to get, give back to the Chargers. And of course, Zach Wilson fumbles, but it's like, honestly, I was signing up for Zach Wilson fumbles. But the broadcast, speaking of broadcast, right? Like, the 6th sack comes on Zach Wilson. They're like, oh my God, they have gotten their 6th sack. And then they put up like the sack, totals for each team. And it's like the Chargers have been sacked 5 times too. And the fundamental difference is the fumble that Justin Herbert had was somehow recovered by the Chargers, in the same way that the other fumble that the Chargers have were recovered by the Chargers. And every fumble is just recovered by the Chargers. And so, like, that's just straight up fumble luck. And the defensive/special teams touchdown thing is just defensive/special teams luck. And I'm sitting there in the start of the 4th quarter, I'm like, based on the way these two teams played, like, just look at the box score with regards to like total yardage. This game should be 6-6. And that's even including like the assumption that the Jets are going to have all these false start and stupid, speaking of Garrett Wilson, block in the back penalties on the like only good plays that they have are on these sort of needless penalties where they couldn't get lined up correctly or guys were just #doing too much. And you're just sitting there going like, yeah, so I was right in that this game was going to be an evenly played under kind of crappy type game. And that I would love to have 3.5 points in every circumstance where both teams or neither team gets to 200 yards.
Yeah.
And it's just like like you said, a football thing happened, right? So the point is like the last 2 weeks have felt like the Chargers have not had to do much other than kind of be at the right place at the right time and hope that the other team didn't screw anything up. So I can't talk you out of this line as it goes a little bit higher. The problem is I'm not really sure how this line is getting as high as it is from the rating systems, that we use based on previous point spreads, right? Because like the Lions would have to get like one hell of a boost from beating up on the Raiders last week. And like, speaking of teams like trying to give away games, like if you'll recall,
Yeah.
That was exactly the most buttoned up performance in the history of like, I might have been the best performance in Detroit football history, but in general, that wasn't exactly like the best performance anybody's ever seen, right? It's the Raiders, who literally the next day like fired everybody in the organization. Like, what am I supposed to put into that game? So if I'm going to give the Lions all kinds of credit for beating the Raiders a week after getting trucked by the Ravens, and I have to then kind of give the Chargers some credit for just not screwing things up. And so if I move, both teams have to either stay the same or move up in ratings. And that still doesn't get me to like 2.5. And so because this line is moving up, because it's only Wednesday, if this gets to 3,
which it will,
I don't know that if it will or not, just because like 3 is such a key number here. And if it does, like, it might take 5 seconds to get bought back. But it's like, I think at +3, like, the Chargers have to be the bet. And then like maybe it lands somewhere in between, especially for me, who's already made a bet on the money line. If I can get Chargers +3 where I win a bet on a push because I have that Lions money line already in place, then like, that's the thing I have to do. And from just a value perspective, like, I gotta mess around with the ratings like pretty aggressively to get to 2.5 or 3. Yeah. And so that's where I sort of like, I kind of get my back up, where it's like, yeah, listen, I agree. I was in there pushing the money in at money line and sort of -1, if you will. But like, and I know it's only like 1 to 2.5, and you're like, what's the big deal? Like, it's not like their kicker's going to get hurt and they're going to knee on an extra point. Like, it's just the fact that this is getting to 3, and it's like, oh, this is going to be a situation where if it was always +3, I would have already made a bet on the Chargers here.
Yeah. Right? No. Totally get it. Interesting game for sure, in a scenario in which you have 2 teams kind of on weird trajectories, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like they're on the same plane, but I feel like the way that we're viewing what the Chargers are doing is kind of a smokescreen. That's kind of where I'm at with this.
What do you have the Lions? Anyways. What would you have the Lions as a rating, given like we talked about like a 70 being like, okay, they're in contention there for,
I'd put them at like a 65, 60, low 60, somewhere there. Like, they're on their way. They're just below those like teams for real. Yeah. I think they'd give the Niners and Philly a go, but I don't think they'd win.
Yeah. So, I mean, we got to get to 69. Nice. And that's not touching the Chargers rating, by the way. We got to get to 69 to get them to -2.5 as a fair price. And that's a Chargers rating at 56. And keep in mind, like, also with like 1 point of home field advantage for the Chargers. Like, do not get it twisted. There is not a 2-point advantage for the Chargers, and one, maybe one's a little bit of a stretch, and that would maybe get you a little bit further here. But like, yeah, you kind of have to downgrade the Chargers to get any further than this. And we are right at, speaking of the Ravens, right? The difference between the Ravens being at 69 is like, I want to move the range for the Ravens up to 75 because I thought that before the season, and they keep covering against all of these teams. For example, the Lions, whereas the Lions are reaching the pinnacle of their range. And why am I supposed to move their rating past past 70? Like, I haven't seen that, right? I saw like kind of a lucky or sort of a stupid cover against the Raiders, and I saw them get blown out, by the Ravens, and they played some other, kind of mediocre teams and did well against them. But like, that's what getting to the rating to this point, that's what the money's for, right? Like, that's what the rating's for. We got there because of that. So it's like, I can't go any further with the Lions. And so if this line goes a little bit further, I'm just gonna have to hold my nose and hope the Chargers play like a good game instead of just like a mistake-free game. And honestly, sometimes we're just waiting for the Chargers to not make a bunch of mistakes. And since that usually takes a lot longer, or never, we end up frustrated. And it's like, okay, if they're going to actually play like clean games and everybody's going to be healthy, Bosa and Mac and Derwin James, it's like, all right, like, maybe this is a squad. But it's like, I don't know, they haven't really proven anything in the last couple of weeks to me. So
yeah, super interesting. That's one of the really good games. I beg for. Why couldn't this be a primetime game or one of those clean window games? We got the Texans and the Bengals, a game that also I wouldn't mind watching on its own. Bengals at home, favored by 7 points. This one's a tough one for me right now because I understand the entire world is on the Bengals, and that's why this is up to 7. I get it. We are all over the Bengals beating Buffalo last week, which was, luckily for me, one of the things that I was able to recoup some money on.
I told you, I can say this
cash.
because I said it beforehand. Biggest bet of the season for me. So
Yeah, right. Like
I
was happy to come out like with some dubs there
Yeah.
because of that. Cool. The problem is, if you're looking for a team, sometimes you look at a line and you're like, this might be overvalued because everyone's on the Bengals. The problem is they're facing the Texans, and all you're hearing about is CJ Stroud in the game of his life, 470 yards, 5 touchdowns, all that. So I don't even know where to really like rate this, or if I'm looking at it and seeing, okay, well, one team's overvalued, the other team's not. I don't know. But I will say that I don't think that CJ Stroud is going to be able to put up 470 yards and 5 touchdowns against the Bengals defense. I struggle to see that happening. The other thing is, I just think the Bengals are really good. Like, as we discussed all last week and the reasons why we were on them last week. Cool. So you give me 7 points. It's at a flat 7, meaning I take a push. I'm about that life. Give me the Bengals laying 7 points.
Yeah, and you mentioned it being quote unquote up to 7. It's actually down because this line opened 8. But the injury issue with Jamar Chase is, I think, the movement there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because Chris Collinsworth called it like almost to a T, right? Where he goes down on that play that I mentioned before, and Collinsworth is like, he is going to crawl out of bed tomorrow. And the next day, right, he's talking about like maybe he's not going to be able to play, and Joe Burrow's sort of like, well, we can get along without him, or like blah blah blah. And it's like, that sounds like a guy who crawled out of bed on Monday, right? And as the week goes on, because like he stayed in the game and he played, and he said that it got worse as the game went on. It's like, yeah, of course it did, man. You took a really hard fall. It's like, as the week goes on, you know how this works with football players, right? And the best medical teams and therapy teams that, money can buy, or at least in theory, right? Is like, he's probably going to feel a lot better come Sunday. And, he probably ends up playing. And so I can see this number that dipped. You could get -6.5 at for -115 or -120 on the Bengals. I can see this potentially pushing actually back through 7, because when you talked about the ratings for these teams, we are outside of the Jamar Chase situation, right? Like if you have a full rating for a team and you have to take some of that off because Jamar Chase might not play, but the full version of the Bengals here, we're back. We're at about a 67, right? And I know I mentioned like the idea of a 70 being kind of a Super Bowl caliber team. The Bengals finished around this number last year. Now you'll remember their rating took a bit of a hit because of their offensive line issues, right? And everybody kind of worrying about that. And that ended up potentially, you can make a case that ended up costing them a second straight Super Bowl appearance when they lose that game close to the Chiefs, in part because the Chiefs were able to get to Joe Burrow, right? And one of the reasons we don't like the Bills all that much this season is because they weren't able to get to Joe Burrow the week before. And so, again, with a theoretically sort of full roster, like ready to go here, the team, that we thought we were going to get last week on Sunday night against the Bills that we got, this line I have at -8.5. And so, I'm right there with you as far as, liking the Bengals. And I think the thing with the Texans here is that you have to remember this team lost to the Carolina Panthers 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, they needed every one of those 470 yards to beat the Bucs at home. And if you saw the Bucs a week ago against the Bills,
correct.
Right. We know not to think too much of the Bucs necessarily, right? So the reality is, like, that's very cool for CJ Stroud. Like, I've got some offensive rookie of the year, at him at a plus price. So like, cool. He's basically seemingly locked that up, unless Will Levis just absolutely goes ham, or your man's Aiden O'Connell starts throwing for, 400 yards a game. But it's like, okay, that was very cool for him. And that was very cool for the Texans, who, again, part of the handicap on the Texans is like, yeah, they're probably going to win a lot of home games against like equal-ish competition. And when I say equal-ish competition, that's below average competition. That's like, low 40s, right? We talk about the great divide here, potentially, of there not being any average teams. Just because the Texans beat the Buccaneers in a very entertaining game, and obviously moment of the year there with Ngumbawale kicking that field goal. It's like, just because you did that doesn't mean like one score game against the Bengals, who like, they know it too. They know that they are back and sort of healthy and like they also know not to like bleep around because of the losses that they've already accrued and the division that they're in and the fact that they're literally, speaking of next Thursday's game, cannot wait, right? They are one sort of win away against the Ravens next Thursday from like potentially being essentially in first place in the division. And like kicking away this game against an inferior opponent, honestly, would be really disappointing for a team at this point that isn't like, oh, I'm hoping to try to be a contender here, like the Chargers, like the Lions, et cetera, et cetera. It's a team that is a contender and has been a contender for 2 years now. It's like, I'd be really bummed out if they didn't at least win this game by 7 points, even if you sort of go, oh, it's a tough spot, like Buffalo last week on Sunday night and then a road, short week, blah, blah, blah. If this is like a 12-point spread, okay, like maybe there's some backdoor and like short week and, rest guys a little bit earlier than maybe you should, and the backdoor would be wide open. As long as this is 7 or again, maybe 6.5 if Jamar Chase doesn't play, or maybe even lower if Jamar Chase does not play and it ends up being 6, or maybe just people like the Texans because it's like, oh, they could backdoor anything. It's like, they didn't score much against Carolina 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. No, totally agreed there. Cincinnati -7 is the pick there. This one's a little tougher. We got the Saints at the Vikings. Saints laying 2.5 points on the road. Obviously, we know the Minnesota story last week was a Josh Dobbs story. I'm going to be riding Minnesota this week at plus
Hell
2.5 at home. This is just an interesting one for me. The story of Josh Dobbs is insane, right? Because you're hearing about him not knowing players' names. You're hearing him being explained what the plays are in the huddle over the headset, him asking receivers what routes they're going to be running in the huddle, and they're able to win the game. Like, just complete insane behavior going on. With all that said, though, now you have a week to sort things out. The Saints have looked a bit better the last few weeks, but at the same time, like, I'm still not in a position where I'm going to be laying points with the Saints on the road, a team that normally doesn't play well on the road, and in a building that is going to be rocking in Minnesota because of what happened last week. I know this has nothing to do with the point spread. Did you see the video of the Vikings fan that was like shaving their eyebrows in support of Josh Dobbs? I was just like that is a fan base that is just hyped up because they're in the mix, right?
Totally.
So I say all that to say that building is going to be insane. And there's not many teams that I would be taking to lay points in that building this week just because of everything that happened last week. So give me Minnesota Vikings at home. I will take the home dogs and the plus 2.5.
Yeah, I have a handful of teams here listed as like 42. It's like a Jackie Robinson thing. I got them down as 42. They are the Jets, the Steelers, the Falcons, the Commanders, the Raiders, the Colts, the Buccaneers, and the Texans, right? Like those are all the teams that are like, all right, like I get it, right? Like you're not good, but like you're also not like awful. Mm-hmm. The Vikings got rated worse than that last week. But the funny thing is about the Vikings is like you're sitting there and you're going like, first of all, I actually kind of thought Jaren Hall was good. He was 3 out of 4. He was scampering around. We lost a yardage prop over 15.5 rushing yards. He had 11 rushing yards on like the first drive or the first 2 drives of the game and literally got concussed on like the 1 yard line. I also might have had a Jaren Hall anytime touchdown. That was like doubly brutal because I was like, he's going for the end zone. Oh, he's not going to get the end zone. Oh, he's not conscious. Like that's a bad combination. And so as I'm watching that game, as somebody who had the Vikings money line, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, okay, how, like from a mechanical standpoint, like how does it work with Josh Dobbs? Like, okay, you don't need to know. He never has to know their names, right? Like in theory, he just never does. But he has to know the plays, right? And I look at and I think of Kevin O'Connell and I go, well, what sort of famous example of a coach telling a quarterback where to throw the ball, giving him the plays and telling him where to throw the ball in his headset before you flip the switch on, to turn that off? I think it's with 15 seconds left in the play clock.
Oh, the Rams.
The Rams. And Kevin O'Connell comes from that coaching tree, if you will, and I believe was, I think, the quarterback's coach when Jared Goff was there, and the Rams went to the Super Bowl with Sean McVay telling Jared Goff where to throw the football right up until the point where the clock gets shut off. And then they get to the Super Bowl against the Patriots, and Bill Belichick has 2 weeks to disguise every single defense, and the Rams can't score because he just changes the defense as soon as the play clock switches.
Belichick.
I don't think Dennis Allen is sharp enough to have that level of disguise here. If that happens to be the same situation, because after the game, they say, yeah, like he would tell me the play. I would relay the play. The other 10 guys know what the play is, but I don't. So, like, you know what I mean? And then after you know what I mean? So the order of operations is tell all the guys the play, and then I'm going to tell you what the play is, and then tell you where to throw the football. And when honestly, the first read, if it's not there, just kind of take off and run. And he showed it with Arizona, and he showed it throughout his entire career. Like, he is low key slippery, right? Like, he's an evasive guy. And so, having watched Tyson Bagent kind of evade, I think he had like 65 rushing yards against the Saints this past week. I'm like, Josh Dobbs can do that. I don't even care if he introduces himself to the rest of the team and knows everybody's name. I really don't. Again, we talked about this last week, right? He's kind of like the perfect mercenary where he should just be a free agent and he should just go to a different team every week and just like do that. I don't know how many other coaches and how many offensive coordinators and play callers can do it the way that Kevin O'Connell did it. But between that and changing this defense around, or hiring Brian Flores to change the defense around, Kevin O'Connell, if this team makes the playoffs, how is he not coach of the year? Like, this is all coaching. And it was like one thing when they beat the 49ers because they had a really, really strong game plan. It was like, Kirk Cousins looks like the best he's ever looked. And it's like, well, we've seen Kirk Cousins for a really long time. Is this Kirk Cousins or is this Kevin O'Connell? And Kevin O'Connell, you know, a year and a half into his tenure here, he is vibing his face off right now. And so, like, this is the ultimate sort of puppet master type thing. And maybe it'll sort of die off. Maybe it'll die off this week. Maybe it'll die off when they go up against a defensive coordinator or head coach that is capable of sort of disguising defenses this well. But I don't see that happening with Dennis Allen. And by the way, the Vikings defense continues to be awesome. And Derek Carr is not somebody that I'm necessarily afraid of against a pretty good defense. And I know that sometimes it takes fans and bettors to kind of get away from a narrative about like, oh, the Vikings defense being so bad. I can tell you this, like, the Vikings defense is good. Their offensive line is good. And it sucks that Cam Akers got hurt because now they have to fully rely on Alexander Madison. And like, that would be really helpful against a Saints run defense that isn't particularly great either. And like, that'd be a nice thing to rely on. But like you said, man, we're getting a couple of points here with the home team. And like, if we can fade Derek Carr, Dennis Allen, that whole Saints outfit, whether it's giving a ton of points, like they probably should have covered that game against the Bears. They turned them over. It was a 5-0, I think was the turnover ratio. And it's like, how did they not cover? And it's like, because those guys suck. Suck. That's why they didn't cover a big number. And it's probably why they're going to lose this game, because those guys suck.
Not going to get any arguments from me there. Minnesota plus 2.5. We keep it rolling here with the Packers at the Steelers. Steelers at home laying 3 points. Packers showed signs of life last week, or did they just face Brett Rippon and the Rams?
Yeah, ding, ding, ding.
The Steelers getting extra prep, having not played since last Thursday. I don't really like laying 3 points with Pittsburgh's offense, but the Packers got to show me a little bit more than beating the Rams backup QB who just got cut for Carson Wentz. So give me Pittsburgh -3 at home here.
Yeah, I mean, listen, laying points with Pittsburgh is no party, but like, doesn't this setup kind of exactly the same as last Thursday, where it's like, listen, it might come down to a 3 and 4 point game, and like maybe you need them to win, you know, get that touchdown to get it to 4. It's kind of the same setup, right? Like Jordan Love in the role of Will Levis, where like sometimes it looks good, but a lot of the times, like, you know, especially for Jordan Love anyway, specifically, like it doesn't. The Packers talent level from a skill position perspective, I don't think is better than the Titans.
Yeah.
And the defense, I don't think is better than the Titans defense, right?
No.
So isn't it kind of just the same thing, only everything is a little bit worse? I mean, the coach
and Pittsburgh's at home.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. And Pittsburgh was at home last Thursday. So when it's like, when all you're doing is replacing the Titans, all you're doing is replacing the Titans with the Packers. And you're literally doing it with what maybe, definitely a worse coach, probably almost definitely a worse defense. Definitely the worst quarterback, I think, at this point. I mean, listen, we don't know that much about Will Levis to have a parade for him necessarily. But like, honestly, I feel like I've kind of seen enough from Jordan Love. And it's like, yeah, Packers got a win last week. But as you mentioned, right, like if you're going to constantly get short fields or quick turnarounds and get your offense, the weird thing is when you have these Clayton Tunes and Brett Rippins of the world is like your defense your offense, can go 3 and out or can have like a 6-play drive and still stay in motion, in rhythm, because you get the ball back like 40 seconds later. And it's like, you're literally just kind of taking a timeout before being like, all right, back on the field, guys. It's like, okay, where do we get it? Same place we left off. And it's like, oh, okay, we've had timeouts longer than that. Like the quarter break was longer than that. Sweet. Right. And so it's just like, okay, cool win for the Packers. But like, honestly, that was way too close for way too long if you're really being an honest cheesehead out there. So yeah, man, like at -3, I've already made the bet on the Steelers. And I mean, listen, I'm not going to 3.5 here, but at -3, Steelers have already been a bet for me.
I like it. Guess what? I like it a lot. Keep the train moving here. We got the Titans at the Bucs. Titans at the Bucs, -1.5. Tampa Bay is favored at home. This one's a weird one. We just talked about the Titans and their game last Thursday against the Steelers. Will Levis, I still think that he looked okay. That Steelers defense is a problem. We know that. The Bucs defense is not the Steelers defense. The Bucs are just a completely weird, strange team to me. Baker sometimes looks like the old Baker, and then other times, he's throwing deep balls and Mike Evans is actually catching them. Don't know really how to rate the Bucs, but I will say, if I'm going to get any points in this, I'll take the points with Tennessee. And yeah, that's just where I'm at. Tennessee +1.5.
Yeah, man. Sometimes Baker's the butcher, and sometimes he's the candlestick maker. And I don't really know what the difference is between those two things, but I guess it depends on whether you bet on him or bet against him, because most of the time it's frustrating, no matter what you do. I'm right there with you, right? Like again, I just mentioned like the difference between the Titans and the Packers, and why I like the Steelers this week, and I was sort of like on the fence last week, and then I didn't have a play, and somehow we ended up a half yard short, even though I. Pretty sure we handicapped that game perfectly. We were a half point short of the total. Maybe if George Pickens could get his feet in bounds, that would have been reflective in an over. But I was impressed with how the Titans played in that game, right? Because the case for the Steelers last week is that it was all going to be overwhelming, and Will Levis is going to turn into everybody's favorite term, right? The pumpkin. Maybe that's just a Halloween thing. I don't know if we do that in mid-November, but
turkey.
He's going to turn into a turkey. Nice. You just go to the butcher and grab a turkey. Yeah, honestly, like just fundamentally, right? Like I think the Titans are pretty good. I think Will Levis is pretty good. I think certainly it's going to be a lot better setup having the week and a half off to get him again a little bit more comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing with the Bucs is, and the thing that'll sort of trick you is less about Baker and it's more about the defense and the big names that are on that defense, right? And of course, like a couple of weeks ago, we didn't have Vita Vea for that game against Buffalo, and maybe that wouldn't have been such a ridiculous cover. Maybe that would have just been a standard cover if they had Vita Vea in that game. But like you got names that people have heard of. Carlton Davis, right?
Yeah.
Is out there. And it's just like, oh yeah, I mean the Carlton Davis is just constantly getting burned by CJ Stroud and just about everybody on the Texans, right? And so like if there are holes in a defense, like they're gonna get exposed. And the bad news for teams that their holes are like the like veteran defender is like you can't really bench him in the same way you can just kind of like bench a rookie or like a second-year guy or a guy that we've never heard of, right? And so if like that thing is there and the run defense isn't up to snuff because like, again, the big guys on the defensive line are banged up, there's not a ton left, right? And then you are relying on Baker, who again, like offense not great against the Falcons, offense not great against Buffalo. And then the offense was really good, obviously, last week, but like Texans aren't a great defense, right? Like they can come up and they can make some plays or whatever, but like they're not a fully formed, fully functioning group just yet. That's part of the rebuild, right? The good news is they're putting the people in place. Obviously, Derek Stingley out for the year, like that was a big blow to them at the start of the season. I think that was like week 1 or week 2. And it's just like, yeah, okay, they're not ready yet. So like, yeah, like a professional like quarterback in Baker can vibe a little bit. And I don't think Mike Evans dropped a, murderous third down or touchdown pass, which normally he's up for. Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I like the Titans here. I think, again, another situation where it's like better coach, probably a better defense, any given week type situation when it comes to like a quarterback type deal here. I think the line is probably a little bit correct. Actually, I think it's probably closer to pick 'em. So I realize we're getting 1, point here. But honestly, like that might come in handy, right? If this game is like a 17-16 type game, which like honestly, I wouldn't be all that surprised if it was kind of that. Oh, surprise, an NFL game, sloppy, junky, undery type of a game. Yeah, give me. I'll take the 1.5 extra points here, or anything in the pluses when it comes to the money line for the Titans.
Super exciting stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Don't know what to make of this one as we got the Commanders at the Seahawks. Seahawks are laying 6.5 points. And I'm going to be honest here. I am on the Commanders here at the plus 6.5. Seahawks and Geno, we talked about it last week. And Geno, I mean, yeah, if we mentioned last week before heading into it that we weren't really sure what to make of Geno as things kind of looked a little sloppy, we'll say, the last few weeks. A lot of the shine on Geno's kind of gone away. 6.5 seems like a lot to me to be laying on a Seahawks team right now. I got to be serious. When I watch the Washington football team, they're also a team that I just can't get a good grasp of. Are they one of your 42 teams that you were just naming, or are they above that number or below that number? Because I don't really know where to put them, but I feel like I like the idea of Sam Howell getting points against a team that I don't really think is that good or as good as we think they are.
Yeah, it's funny, right? So yes, they are part of the Jackie Robinson club here. And that's a club that at any given time, like they can pull off an upset. Right. And so like, I'm looking for teams that I'm not against fading to lose as a favorite. And the Seahawks fit that bill. Right. In the same way that the Seahawks fit the bill of a team that could win. Right. And so when I talked about them being this team that's kind of, right at the league average type verge here, what does that mean? Well, okay, if your league average is 50, then your range is 40 to 60. And at any given time, you can play to a 60, and any given time, you can play to a 40. And so my problem here with I'll put this way, I've already bet the Commanders a plus 6.5. That's already done. The thing that I'm worried about is that like Seattle just kind of does this every second week type of thing. And so there are certain teams that are average and they're just going to play to a 50 every week. But there are certain teams like the Seahawks will play to a 40, will play to a 60. And they kind of never play to a 50, right? It's always like way better or way, way worse. And so it's like, yeah, like I kind of like the Commanders more on the money line than I do the points because it kind of feels like the Seahawks either win by 2 touchdowns or lose, and maybe lose by 2 touchdowns. The other thing I'm worried about the Commanders is like, they didn't fire the coach by any means last week, but the whole like trading of the 2 of their best players, like that is the same kind of thing as firing the coach, where it's like, oh, ownership is rejuvenating something here, right? Where it's like, oh, they got rid of this cancerous coach guy that we all hate. Oh, you think we're not good enough? Like they're going to get that bump. And then when they play a crappy team like the Patriots, and that's the thing that I kind of missed out on, is it's just like, man, the Patriots are so bad. It's ridiculous that like, I don't want to overrate the Commanders off of that. And I don't feel like I am. It's more just like, oh man, if you're going to give me 6.5 points, you're going to be 2 plus 220 on the money line. Like, yeah, all right, fine. Like I'll take them, but it's like it's not something that I should be as nearly as excited as I normally would be if this was just kind of like a more standard state game. Like I'd feel better about it if the Seahawks had played really well last week, and honestly, I'd feel a little bit better about it if the Commanders hadn't played well last week. Like I know that sounds kind of the opposite way that it should, but like maybe if those 2 situations were the case, like maybe I would have been able to get 7. And hell, we still might be able to get 7 by the time this game rolls around, right? But like I've already bet it at 6.5, and again, it's just a high. It's like you mentioned, right? It's like a high variance type of game with these 2 teams.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. But give me the points there with the Commanders. We move to Germany once again as we got the Colts at the Patriots. The Colts are not at. You know what I'm saying? Yep. The Colts are favored in this game by 2 points against New England. This again, like the chances of me waking up to watch this game. No, maybe I might just be up actually. Now that I think about it, I might just be up, and it's always good. I will say it is good to have a game on in the background while I'm up. You're looking at the rest of the the market we'll say, for your Sunday, figuring it all out. It is good to have a little something up on one of the TVs while I'm watching Countdown on the other TV. But I will say in this one, I'm leaning Patriots +2, but there's really no good reason behind that. As you just mentioned, the Patriots, it's not like they've looked great. Basically, your man's Mac Jones is just looking marginal. Like, he's just not making the horrific turnovers that he was a few weeks ago.
I don't know. I gotta stop you there.
As much or as many times as he was. We're doing this on a scale, okay? I'm doing this on a Mac Jones scale. I'm not saying that he's looked good. I'm not saying that he's been a good quarterback. I'm saying if the scale is what we saw a couple weeks ago, where he was throwing pick sixes on the goal line, right? And then fumbling in the end zone, like, he's marginally improving for where we saw Mac Jones. Not saying that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean,
not saying it's a great thing.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm just saying it's Mac Jones. That's all I'm saying.
That interception at the end of the game, as they're already in field goal range, essentially. And you're literally like, okay, this is how it works, man. You just get him into field goal range and, like, okay, take a couple of, like, really, really easy sort of throws here. If you can't get them, that's cool. Just don't take a sack. Let's go to overtime, yada, yada, yada. And then, deflected, intercepted, ball tried to be forced, didn't see a guy, all the same, like, BS excuses, right? Like, over and over and over again. It's just like, this guy's really bad, man. He's just really, really bad. And it's like, the secret is, it's just like there's a deodorant because he's wearing a Patriots jersey or something, but it's why this team's, like, against the spread record is atrocious. And I'm just.
So am I supposed to be laying points here with the Colts in Germany?
Well, but the thing is, like, yeah, you're saying it, and I don't know if it's the psychology of, like, the way that these games are ordered when it comes to, like, who's the home team and who's not, but it's like, why is this this isn't a home game for the Patriots? Like,
no,
why?
Definitely not.
Right? Like, this is just a neutral site game between, like, two teams that, like, aren't very good, but one of them I think is rated like they are functional. and that's the Patriots, whereas the other one is honestly rated, like, lower than that.
Okay.
Or at least has been up until this point. Now, this is obviously a neutral site, and the fun thing about neutral site is you don't have to factor in home field advantage. So as this line, which is, started out as a pick'em, and if I'm not mistaken, was the Patriots were favored in the look-ahead line. I'm just going to pop that up real quick. Well, okay, they were favored in the summer, -4.5, which is hilarious looking back to, like, what we thought of the Patriots in the summer. And then last week they were -1 before these two games. And of course the Colts win, the Patriots lose, and that's how you go from -1 on one side to -1 on the other side. And there's some twos available, so I'm not going to rough you up about putting, Patriots +2, because it's, there are some available, because we're in that 1 and 2 range where, like, people aren't, it's not like you're buying, let me grab +2 and get some -1 and let me, scalp anything there. I'm out. If you're asking the Patriots to win a game, and you're not giving me, like, 2-1 odds or 3-1 odds, and playing it in Foxborough, then no. I'm on the Colts on this. I've already made the bet at Colts -1 in this game. And by the way, like, it's not a large bet, right? It is the same sort of deal where, like, this is going to be on TV1 and Sam Ponder is going to be on TV2, and we're going to be good. And that's just how we're going to spend our morning,
Shouts to Sam Ponder, by the way. And I will change this pick in honor of Sam Ponder, and I will switch it to the Colts on the road.
There's always reasons to bet on the Patriots, and just they're always wrong, almost. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
there are always reasons, and then you get there, and you're just like, no. And honestly, like, it makes me like the Commanders even less against the Seahawks this week because of how little I like the Patriots. Like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Anyway,
the funny thing for me here,
convincingly, is disappointing.
The real funny thing here for me when I look at this game is just the standpoint, as simple as it is. It's just, you're putting these two teams on a neutral field. What do I know about each of these two teams? And I feel like at least Gardner Minshew can at least hand the ball off, and the Colts can run the ball. I think You know what I mean? Whereas like the Patriots, who knows what Mac Jones you're going to see week in, week out. So
he didn't end up having the rushing yards that we hoped for. Speaking of prop losses last week, but like Jonathan Taylor's back. Yeah. Jonathan Taylor is back, and it's like, and he's catching balls out of the backfield, and he's scoring touchdowns, and like he's doing stuff, and like that's something that you can rely on, where it isn't just about Gardner Minshew and like kind of hoping for the best, right? And like that's more than I can say for anything the Patriots have.
I'm with you. And here's a game where I also don't know what to make. I'll be very honest here. We got the Falcons at the Cards. Falcons on the road, favored by 1 point. And I think Kyler Murray is back. We're not sure if Kyler Murray is back.
He's back.
All indicators pointing to that. Yes.
He's back, yeah.
Falcons offense did look better with Taylor Heineke, but at the end of the day, it's still Taylor Heineke, and there's a lot of issues with the Falcons for sure. Still don't know what their whole plan is with their highly touted running back that they use in very weird ways. Don't really know what to make of what the Falcons are doing here. I look at this game and I think that knowing that Kyler Murray is back, pardon me, knowing that he's back for sure, I'm going to take the Cardinals in this game. The hesitation there was because without Kyler Murray, I think I'd be a little more likely to take the Falcons, but I feel like the Cards might get a little bit of a boost, whatever that means, right? Mm-hmm. But they're at home. The Falcons just appear to be too much of a wild card for me.
Hard disagree. Like the idea that Kyler Murray is going to step in and be good in his first game back, when I don't know how good Kyler Murray was when he was
to begin with,
before he got hurt, is nonsensical to me. This line obviously reflects, shouldn't say obvious, but like maybe it's obvious. It reflects that Kyler Murray's back and that's a significant upgrade off of not just Clayton Tune, but also Josh Dobbs. And I think that's my problem with it, right? Is like, yes, the Clayton Tune upgrade is certainly there, but even if I blow by Josh Dobbs here, I still have Falcons -3. Like I have to get the Cardinals up to like low 30s.
Kyler's not worth that.
Yeah, like I got to get them up to like low 30s for this game to be a pick'em. And I mean, maybe that's the case, and obviously we'll see. God, I have to even go a little higher than that. I got to go mid-30s to get, and again, these are all sort of estimations and just sort of our rating system here, right? So like they're not gospel. But like if the point of the whole thing is like haven't the Cardinals range be 20, which is kind of the bottom that we're kind of willing to go, which is funny because Clayton Tune, when that game ended up closing last week, by the way, at 13.5 for the Browns, with a decent, like a pretty aggressive, like give for the Browns as like getting an upgrade with Deshaun Watson. Do you know what the rating for the Cardinals was? It was 15. It was like, it was below the like equator, right? It was like below into the Earth's core of their rating. And like, obviously you watch the game and you're just like, yeah, I mean, if that team played 17 games this season, it would go 0-17. It would be the worst team in the history of football. Like you could make a case. And so when I say like the cap on the floor is 20, it's like if you go below that, you are an 0-17 type team. If you go above 80 on the top end, you are a 17-0 type of team. You are the Patriots of 2009, and as I mentioned, on the low side, the Lions of whatever that was, 2016 or something like that. So anyway, it's like, yeah, that's probably the Clayton Tune version. Now, the Kyler Murray version of this is going to all of a sudden be into the mid to high 30s.
That math doesn't math.
No, man. Like, there's too much else going on that isn't going on, if you know what I mean. And part of the reason we're getting this deal is because the Falcons are getting downgraded because Arthur Smith is a joke, and like literally everybody's laughing at Arthur Smith, and we're the fantasy people are frustrated by the Bijan Robinson thing. And it's funny because like Arthur Smith is such a jerk that he'll tell people how stupid they are because they say, "Hey, Desmond Ritter's not good. When are you going to Taylor Heineke?" And he'll be like, "What are you don't understand?" And then like a week later, he'll go to Taylor Heineke. So like while he tells us how good Tyler Algier is and how Bijan Robinson is doing such a great job of like being a decoy effectively, would you be shocked if like next week Bijan Robinson was all of a sudden prominently involved in the goal line? Like it's not like he has any pride to like stick with these bad takes. He tossed Ritter aside like the week that he told us we were all stupid for thinking that Desmond Ritter was so bad. So he doesn't even have his own, he's not even stubborn enough to do that, right? And so like what if Bijan Robinson is all of a sudden prominently involved? Doesn't this team improve? And so if this team improves and they're being rated as a team that it, should be worse, which again, I've been saying all season long, and so I've been making all this money fading the Falcons by and large this season. It's like, yeah, okay, like that's where we want. We want the team to play better and be rated lower. That's awesome. And by the way, if you can tell me the Cardinals are going to be rated kind of like, a functional team, pretty darn close to the Patriots at this point, at least by my ratings. Like, no, they're not even trying to win. If they were trying to win, by the way, they would have rushed, Kyler Murray back 2 weeks ago. But like eventually he just is so healthy that they have to play him, right? Like it gets awkward. It's like, so why isn't Kyler playing? Why are you playing Clayton Tune? Who, by the way, Clayton Tune, they knew was so bad in the preseason that they traded for Josh Dobbs the week before the season started. And they played him in week 1. So it's like, oh no, Clayton Tune didn't. I'm here to tell you, Shel, Clayton Tune didn't improve in September and October because he wasn't taking first team reps, right? There was you weren't able to see whether Clayton Tune improved. So that's not why he got the start last week. He got the start because they're like, we got to keep losing some of these games. And like, we can still make the case that Kyler Murray isn't ready to come back yet. But eventually, like, as people have been saying, like, he's out there, he's running around, like, he looks good. But like, Kyler Murray always looks good in practice. He's a supreme athlete who was drafted in multiple sports. Like, of course he looks good in practice. But then we realize that he doesn't really, pay attention to the playbook, and he just kind of like freestyles out there. Thank you. And yeah, like, no, man, like if you're going to overrate the Cardinals and you're potentially underrate with the Falcons based on like the potential, at least we have, for the Falcons, we're all sitting around knowing what the adjustments are. Bijan, like it's not complicated. It's like, yeah, that's perfect. Buy low, sell high situation. And selling high on the Cardinals, what a time to be alive.
It's a good call.
Right?
I like it. I like it a lot. Speaking of things I like, or maybe I guess the flip side will be things I don't necessarily like. It's what's going on with the Giants here as we switch to that game, and a mega line here as the Giants are at the Cowboys laying 16.5 points. And those that follow this pod know that I am not one to lay double digit spreads. This one is almost at 20 and I am laying the 16.5 points with the Dallas Cowboys. Your man's Tommy DeVito is in the mix. He will be getting the start. My question is, I guess this just comes down to, does Dallas even have to be locked into this game? Like, is Dallas locked in knowing like, hey, we beat them already by 40 or whatever the score was? Or is this just a game where they're like, let's just get through this and keep it close? But even if that's the case, how many points is Tommy DeVito going to put up here? Right? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is a tough one for me.
Listen, as of Wednesday afternoon, I'm not positive it is Tommy DeVito because your man, you're one of your all-time favorites. I'm just kidding.
Tyrod.
No, Tyrod's on a gurney somewhere.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I don't know if they've released him from hospital. Because of the Giants' offensive line will kill you. No, Matt Barkley, your man's Matt Barkley has been activated, signed from the practice squad. And honestly, if you've watched, Tommy DeVito, who wasn't particularly good at Syracuse, by the way, if you've seen him play quarterback at any point in our lives, you'd be like, yeah, maybe Matt Barkley, right? Like you would probably have that sort of same feeling. One of the reasons that I mentioned, beyond it absolutely fitting the situation for the Cardinals and the sort of the floor, if you will, for a team rating, is we just got to bump the Giants to the bottom, right? I'm not throwing them through the floor, right? I'm just putting them at the bottom, which is 20 out of 100.
Cool.
And the reason that we'll keep them at the absolute bottom, I mean, the reason we're putting them at the bottom is obvious, but the reason we're going to keep them at the absolute bottom is a couple fold. Offensive line did get a little bit healthy, even though, again, unfortunately, Daniel Jones got hurt anyway. Saquon Barkley is still on the team. And so as much as we don't like the Giants over the course of, this season, you have to remember that Saquon Barkley was not involved in a lot of those games. The other thing is every time DeVito has come in, it has been in the middle of a game because of an injury. Yeah. The aforementioned Tyrod and, of course, Daniel Jones. The quarterback, however much, is always better or is in a better position to succeed, however that may be, after a week of practice.
Correct.
Being the guy in the meetings who's getting quizzed on the plays, being the guy who's practicing with the ones all week, knowing on Sunday night that the following week you are starting an NFL football game. So that is how we get to 20. That's why we're not at 15. Okay. Which I know what's Clayton Tune's excuse, right? Like same situation. So again, grain of salt. This is not me making a massive argument because we have to make it back. I don't want that.
Are you trying to talk me into taking the Giants plus 16.5?
These are facts, okay? Cowboys rating, right, has pretty steadily been in the high 60s, right? That borderline of like, are they a contender? Are they not, right? If you want to literally quantify that, just put that as like a high 60s type of a team. Sure. A team that's like, they're definitely in the playoffs, but can they beat the Eagles, the 49ers, or, whatever sort of similar rated teams, Lions, come playoff time?
Yeah.
You do that math, you throw that into the pot, and you come up with 14.5 for this point spread. Okay? That's kind of it. That's kind of all I got for you, right? It's not, dude. No it's 14.5, and the line is 16.5. Like, move the women and children. Like, have to hit the Jai guys. Like, that's not what this is. It's literally telling you, okay, we got them at it's not rock bottom for the Giants because we made the case of why it might not be the rock bottom.
But it's pretty damn close.
But it's the floor.
We're hearing the Rock's music.
Right? We are, we're on the we're in the basement. We're like, is there another level underneath? And you're like, well, there's a trap door right there. And like the trap door, like Clayton Tune is down there, just throwing a football around. And it's just like, okay, man, you got to get to Clayton Tune Cardinals levels if this is going to be the quote unquote correct point spread. And so I get it because like the Cowboys love beating up on these sorts of teams, and you can easily be like, oh man, another pick six and like this, that, or whatever. I get it. I have not bet this at plus 16.5, which is again fundamentally the point of why I'm like explaining to you this deal, but I'm not like stomping on the table or or the floor. 17, I might. Giants plus 17, I probably make a sort of very standard bet. One bet, right? Like unit.
There's nothing I'm going to say to counter that. I'm just going to say, you know what, people, there's probably better ways for you to spend your money if you're laying your money this weekend on the NFL.
And it's worth mentioning, if you have the Cowboys to use them, this would be your survivor pick. My survivor column went out this morning. Those of you check that out. We have already used the Cowboys, and I should have mentioned when we talked about the Bengals are the survivor pick of the week for those of you who have been following along up until this point. And you know what? It's week 10, and so things are getting a little dicey when it comes to the old survivor picks.
Things are getting a little dicey when we get to Sunday Night Football as we got the Jets and the Raiders. Jets are favored by 1.5 on the road. The Jets cannot protect Zach Wilson long enough for him to look beyond a check down. But honestly, I'm also not about to buy into the Raiders after they celebrated like they won a championship. They look like they celebrated more than the Las Vegas Aces after they won the WNBA championship. The Raiders had the cigars out. They were like, that was just a weird flex. But okay, cool, coach bump, whatever. All that fun stuff. As I look at this one here, it's tough. I really don't know what to make of this game. I'm on the Raiders plus the 1.5, but realistically, like, I don't know what I'm going to see from the Raiders this week after their celebration last week.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, obviously you go, okay, they get the coach bump, right? We had the Jeff Saturday bump and all that worked. And honestly, as the week went on, we talked about this on Wednesday. I'm like, did they hate Josh McDaniel? I'm like, oh yeah, no, they did.
Yeah.
Oh, they did hate him.
They
You're
really
like,
did.
oh, jeez. Okay, all right. Well,
They hated him so much that Davis ate that money, which we didn't really think that he would do because he's still probably, well, he still is
money from
John Gruden, right? So it's like, bro, how much money can you be eating on coaches to not coach your team? It's not a good look. Maybe Becky Hammond can coach the football team, right? She's got some time. She's free right now. She's already under contract.
I don't know if Antonio Pierce, like if the headset's even plugged in, I don't even know if it matters, right? Because if Antonio Pierce is just the vibe going with the Raiders, that's a pretty good setup. And I think the point that you made there about the offensive line, I think is the key here, right? Because all of these teams sort of seem like the same, i.e. the 42, club. But, by the way, if these two teams are the same and the Jets are favored on the road, then like that's reason to take the Raiders, right? Because this line suggests the Jets are somewhat notably better than the Raiders. And again, if we're basing everything off of the Josh McDaniels Raiders, that's probably true. Now, if all of these guys, and I don't know if you saw the clip of Devontae Adams being at an NBA game and the official saying, talking to him about it, and like Devontae Adams is like, yeah, night and day, man, or like so much better vibes and like blah blah blah.
My question was, how's the ref have such good seats? That was my question. It's like, oh yeah, I'm section whatever midfield. I'm like, hold on a second here.
Got in early on the move, man. Got in early on the move. So you just go, okay, and like this is a Raiders team that, by the way, has 4 wins now this season, or 3.
They're somehow not out of it.
No, yeah, and going into the season, this was a team that was like, a 7-win expectation type team. Like that was their win total, right? So it wasn't a team that's like, it's not the Cardinals, where it's like, oh, there's actually no talent. Aiden O'Connell is not, honestly, Aiden O'Connell is better than Tommy DeVito, was better in college than Tommy DeVito. If you told me Aiden O'Connell, I would have told you that Aiden O'Connell was a better quarterback than Brock Purdy coming out of college.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just kind of, so it's like,
you can also tell, much like you were saying, they disliked McDaniels. I feel like you can tell that they disliked Garoppolo too.
For sure.
Like the offensive guys, whether it was Jacobs or Devontae Adams, both seem to be talking up Aiden O'Connell the last few weeks, even when they went back to Garoppolo.
Listen, as somebody who suffers it himself, people don't like the good-looking guy, right? They just don't. So, but honestly, they probably don't like the guy who's like in and out of the lineup and he's got like a back injury, and it's like, and these things are like, oh, he's off this week, he's not on the, he's off, he's back on this week. It's like, if you're injured, like you should be out for the entire, for a month or something like that. Like, I don't know. This is all speculation. Point is like when you're looking at these games and these teams, this isn't like the Colts last year, where it's like, man, you're looking around like it's really not much talent here. The offensive line's playing bad. Like there's nothing, you got nothing on the defense. Matt Ryan is super washed up to the point where he's in the booth now. It's like, well, what are you supposed to like with the Colts? And you could see that like one boost probably had a lot to do with the Raiders. And so it's very easy to say like this one boost with the Raiders had a lot to do with the Giants. It's just like you're also getting the Jets coming to town. And you mentioned with the offensive line, it's like, who's the best player on the Raiders probably? And the answer is Max Crosby. And it's like, if these guys somehow make the playoffs, by the way, Max Crosby is going to be in the mix for Defensive Player of the Year sort of consideration. And I think his odds are like 20-something to 1. It's the problem is there's 3 dudes standing in all these guys' way who would normally have a case. But these guys are kind of entrenched, the 3 guys that I mentioned before. And so you look at the schedule and you go, okay, like, is this where it all kind of falls apart for the Raiders, or are the vibes still cooking to the point where they can win this game and they can throw Zach Wilson around? And you kind of go like, yeah, but it's like, well, when is it all going to fall apart? Then you look at the schedule and you look at week 11 and you see a trip to the Miami Dolphins and you go, oh, that's when it's all going to fall. It's like, it can go one more week. Right? Yeah. Like it's not like I think the Colts, if I'm not mistaken, they went home and they faced the Eagles the next week. And they lost to the Eagles, but it was a close game. They covered that. So it's like they still had the quote unquote vibes. Problem is they went up against a Super Bowl caliber team the next week. Yeah. So the Raiders, I think, have the vibes, but they're going up against the New York Jets. And like that's a way better setup. Whereas next week they go on the road and they get a Super Bowl caliber team in the Dolphins, and I think that probably goes well. And by the way, if they win this game outright, maybe we get a better number on those Dolphins next week. And how sweet would that be? If we get something less than 10, I'd be all about it.
I like that for sure. Going against the Jets and getting the opportunity to say, can Aaron Rodgers just go bleep himself? As we move on to
counterpoint betting take, Aaron Rodgers comeback player of the year. If you can get it anything higher than 20-1, guess what gets way more interesting as he makes this comeback. Now, Shell, you're doing that thing right now. You're doing the media guy thing. I'm going to stop you right there. You're doing media guy thing because you're like, I hate Aaron Rodgers, and you're doing fan/media thing. And you know what? That's fine. I don't like Aaron Rodgers all that much either. But you know what? We're in here. This is business, okay? Business at that doorway. Business in that studio. And business is betting Aaron Rodgers in a season where there's no clear comeback player of the year. The favorite for the award doesn't even play football on a week-to-week basis. And we talked about that before the season when he was -3 something or -8 something. He's down to even money because people are realizing that this guy doesn't even play. The comeback player of the year is wide open. And if there is anything that is comeback player of the year it's slowly watching the progression of the Jets hang around and have their eyes set on the 7th seed, a playoff spot, and have Aaron Rodgers willfully showing up to games, throwing 50-yard passes, telling Derwin James, give me a few weeks. We don't even need a few weeks. We need to give him 2 months. Week 17, week 18, Aaron Rodgers quite literally comes back. And when it comes time to vote on this, in mid to early January, guess who's going to be really into the comeback story of Aaron Rodgers? Me and you, because we are going to be rolling in money. And guess what? When we're rolling in money because of a guy, I like him a lot more. I don't know Aaron Rodgers. I've never met Aaron Rodgers. I don't really want to. But the point is, if we're hitting 20-1, by the way, I already got it at 66-1. But if we're hitting 20-1 type stuff here on a guy because he's such a egomaniac that he wants to come back, that he thinks he can come back. And by the way, it kind of looks like he could come back, and it's 2 months away by now. Dude, it's time to change your attitude out there, folks, about Aaron Rodgers. He is a dollar sign to us right now.
Listen, it's not about any of that. I applaud him for taking a risk and taking a different means of trying to get back quickly to help his team. I applaud him for that. I say that is a really good thing to do. You just don't got to do it all up in the video, as Snoop would say.
It's all marketing,
right? Like that's what
award.
That's what I don't
marketing.
like.
I want him on twice a week on that.
No,
I want cameras following him around. I want the. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm removing the storyline aspect from listen. Obviously, it's going to be crazy. Him returning way early and him hustling back to get back for his team and try to give them a playoff push when you thought he was going to be out for the year. That is a great story.
The shot and
what I don't like is that he is all up in the video every single week. You're practicing every week. Cool. You know when you don't need to be throwing balls before the game when all the cameras are out there filming.
We need to be diddying this.
And you're just throwing a football. There's a long distance between you throwing a pass and you playing quarterback in an NFL game. That is a long ways away. Now, could it be 2 months away? Could it be 2 months away? Okay, cool. You can talk me into that. But do that on the sidelines. Do that in practice.
No.
Do that not before the game.
That's the whole thing is marketing. The whole comeback player of the year award is marketing. It is storyline. It is heartstrings. It is, I can't believe this guy did it. He called it the week, the day after he got hurt. He's like, I'll be back. We're like, ha, ha, ha. You're an idiot. You're a clown. Then, he is going to throw football. I don't what does it hurt? It doesn't hurt us.
All I'm saying is it doesn't tell me anything. The fact that he's able to throw a football right now doesn't tell me. It doesn't make me
the bet. It tells me I need to make this bet. I don't have to hear hearsay and conjecture. Oh, did you hear Aaron Rodgers was in practice? Oh, he threw a 56-yard pass. It's get out there, man. Let me know.
We're talking about two different things. We're talking about two different things. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be betting on him. I'm not saying any of that.
But those two things are connected.
No, I'm saying that him doing it in front of the camera, showing me that he can throw a football, doesn't tell me that he's going to be ready to play again this season.
How doesn't it?
Because he could be doing that and not on camera. There could just be a report that, hey, Aaron Rodgers is throwing a football, and they show it to me on Thursday in practice. And I would be like, oh, okay, cool. He's doing all right. But the fact that he feels the need to come out before the game,
Yes.
it's very much the only thing worse was Russell Wilson doing the fake huddles before the cameras and showing us that he can like call a huddle by himself in front of all the cameras.
But there was, unfortunately for us, there was nothing we could bet on at astronomical odds to take advantage of Russell Wilson's marketing ridiculousness. By the way, Russell Wilson's an interest. We'll talk about Russell Wilson in a second here because we still have another game to go. Like, the point is, because this guy is doing this, it is getting in front of it, right? It's giving us a hint that he's going to do this. We can, for our very own eyes, see him literally progress every time. I love when the Jets are on prime time because I'm like, sweet, I get a check-in with my man Raj to see if he can CPOTY this situation, right? And so every time he does it, I love it. I'm like, okay, Raj is throwing it 56 yards. That's awesome. I don't really like it as far as like if it wasn't a money-making opportunity here, but if he's quite literally campaigning for the greatest comeback that we've ever seen, and we get to bet on this stuff.
Question for you: Is there a world in which the Jets don't medically clear him?
No,
I'm just asking. I was just asking.
Football teams. We need to, and the really honestly, the bummer all of this is if we bet on the Raiders here and the Raiders win, it's another loss in the Jets loss column, and we got to get Jets wins wherever we can get them. And you know what I mean? And so, like, honestly, if like the downside here, because of how much money I have on Aaron Rodgers doing comeback player of the year and the odds that I do, if the downside is here with this +1.5, I mean, God, imagine if they landed exactly on 1. No, if the Jets win this game and I lose this bet this week, it just means we are that much closer to motivated Rodgers coming back here beyond just his ego. So like, yeah, man, how often do we get to see somebody's ego and literally get to bet on that person being a maniac?
No, I get
never.
I'm just saying there's also a more likely scenario that Aaron Rodgers continues to do this charade for us. And then it's like either, well, it's not my fault I couldn't come back. The team just wasn't good enough down the stretch, or they won't medically clear me. But I'm just saying, like, there's just some like world in which he's a superhuman. But hey, guys, it's not my fault. I was ready to go, but you know,
and if
we just can't risk it.
And if the odds for this, honestly, it's the sort of inverse of the Damar Hamlin story, right? Where it's awkward because the Damar Hamlin story is like, we don't want to say like, oh, we're betting against Damar Hamlin because like we obviously all feel really good about the Damar Hamlin story, but like he's not going to win comeback player of the year if he doesn't actually play in any games or is, you know, effective in any way, especially when a guy comes back from an Achilles and potentially, I don't even know if he has to win the games, to be honest with you, but like potentially leads his team or saves the season for the Jets. And the point is like, Damar Hamlin's even money. Never. If it was Aaron Rodgers at even money, never. So this isn't a situation where like, oh man, got to bet so much money on Aaron Rodgers. And then when he screws me at the end by bailing out, like I lost all this money. It's all top end stuff. So it's all just throw $5 on a guy at 50 to 1. And if he cashes, it's $250. And if he doesn't, okay, don't. You know, you're like, oh, that sucks. That's too bad. But you know what? I tell you right now, Shell, if you get off this podcast right now and you go to your favorite sports book and you place a little wager on Aaron Rodgers for comeback player of the year, you give it a couple of days and we'll see how your attitude changes about like being into the Aaron Rodgers thing. And you're saying it right now because you're like, oh, I'm not going to do it because I'm stubborn and I'm more stubborn than Arthur Smith. And like, I'm never going to play Bijan Robinson and all of that stuff. But like, if you went and you did it and you hit the button, guess what, man? You're going to be on the edge of your seat when the Jets play. Well, they're playing in, what am I talking about? They're playing on Sunday Night Football. 60-yard throws. 70-yard throws. I want to see him. If he rolls out and throws this week, come on now. Let's get into it. Shell, hit the button.
Here's the thing,
come for the ride.
Here's the one real risk, though. He can't do too much. Because imagine if he's like trying to roll out and then he fucks something up and falls in front of everyone on camera. That would be amazing.
I mean, at least we'll know, right? At that point. At least we'll know what's
No, but I
up.
mean, he can't risk too much, is what I'm saying, right?
No,
like,
but he's
that's a serious injury. Like, he can't risk and try to do like way too much in front of the cameras, is what I'm saying.
this is a guy. Let's say he gets back on the field, and it's 4 months, almost to the day, and it's week 17, which I believe is like December. I think it's literally New Year's Eve is week 17, so there'll be 2 games left in the season. So he comes back New Year's Eve. They played on what was it, September 11th, right? So it's almost whatever that is, 3.75 months. Let's say he shreds the absolute bleep out of that Achilles coming back.
Mhm.
He's got 8 more months to redo the rehab.
Yeah.
Like, who cares? Like, he's 40 years old, by the way. This isn't like, oh man, he's going to ruin this like promising career.
No.
Like, this is it, dude. This is the swan song. I'm looking up the odds right now at a very popular book. I'm clicking on the thing, 25-1 at a very popular book that I know you have access to. You make a good living. Throw $50 on that and tell me you have flipped and are super. Don't shake your head. Put $20 on it and tell me that your entire attitude doesn't shift by Sunday night. And you're sitting there going like, hope Raj, like when does he roll stuff out? Let's see him backpedal a little bit harder. Let's
all I'm gonna say is that Aaron Rodgers can go bleep himself.
Fair.
And I will also say that I am not big time enough. I'm not Bomani Jones, so I'm not able to give my actual thoughts on Damar Hamlin. But I will just say, go listen to what Bomani Jones had to say about this Damar Hamlin situation and about how weird it is watching that as well. So all of the above in terms of these primetime games and what's happening and comeback player of the year, I'm grossed out by a lot of it. We'll just say that.
Gets a lot less gross when all of a sudden you've got 4 figures riding on a potential return of the biggest egomaniac maybe in the history of the sport.
Listen, I've said it before on this pod. I've quoted Kevin O'Leary before, right? My money has no emotions, right? That's what the line should be, and I get it, and I understand it. I'm not talking you out of it. I'm not talking you out of it.
I'm not. It's already. I'm already in it. There's no out of it. I'm the one talking you in it. I'm telling you to come on in and get in the pool.
I want people to message us and tell us that they've actually done this bet too.
Yes.
Let's wrap this up.
If you've made it almost 2 hours in this podcast, please message us, DM one of us, DM the clutch points people. Like, let's, I want people showing tickets, and I want
tickets.
Christmas Eve when Raj is on the field with 3 weeks to go because the Jets are 6-8. 6-8 are they playing? You know what I mean? Is he coming back at 6-8 with 3 games to go? Ooh, come on, Shell, get in the pool, buddy. Water's warm. 25-1. We'll call that the cutoff price.
So he just has to come back, play 1 game, and he wins.
Well, so that's the thing.
Like, he doesn't have to play well. He doesn't have to lead them to the playoffs. He just has to
the football handicapping element comes in, because if you watch any of these games, isn't the only thing missing salient quarterback play from the Jets? You know what I mean? Isn't that kind of it?
He gets hurt on the first play.
He gets it's
exactly
even money, and you had to put up a legitimate stake. Then we'd be like, no, we're not doing that.
I understand.
25-1. I just told you, $20. You got it lying around. There's probably some in those shoes back there. It was probably just a 20. And
I was gonna reach on my desk right now, and I'm not gonna do that because that would have been a very ignorant move to do on the pod. I don't know where we're at right now. Broncos at Bills, Monday Night Football. There's one last game here. The Bills really laying 7.5 points seems like a lot. Broncos coming off a bye. If we are to see the Broncos play well or better than they have been, you would think that it would come now, coming off the bye week against a Buffalo team that's not really clicking on all cylinders, we'll say. So for that reason, give me the Broncos. I will take the points here.
I'm not entirely sure you're going to need the points in this game.
I
got to tell you, and listen, you said are they going to? This is the time for them to play better. Play better than beating the Chiefs, pretty decently handily. Pretty good, right? And they They beat the week before that. Oh, the Packers. They beat the Packers the week before that.
They can be confident.
Speaking of comeback player of the year, as we all, we're going to allude to, like, if there was a Geno Smith, and this is super ironic and like signs that we're living in a simulation. If there was a Geno Smith type award nominee, isn't it Russell Wilson? Look at his stats, man. Like, they're sneaky good. I think it's like 16-5, like TD INT ratio.
Yeah.
And if the whole thing, like, everybody does the thing, right, where it's like, oh man, Sean Payton, Broncos going to turn it around. Sean Payton's going to get it done. And then, like, when the first 5 or 6 games don't go great, because Russell Wilson is playing only okay, which honestly was so much better than last year. And the defense is terrible, but nobody bothers to check the depth chart to notice that, like, Justin Simmons isn't playing, and like the middle linebacker is out, and the defensive line is ravaged, and all of that stuff. And then the Broncos, start the season like 2-5 or whatever it was that they started the year, and everybody just like goes, oh, so like the coaching change is supposed to be an immediate result type change. Like, this isn't the Antonio Pierce boost, right? This is like, it's going to take a minute, or it's supposed to take a minute. It'd be pretty wild if all of a sudden Russell Wilson was awesome again, and the defense was really good, and like Sean Payton, off of a year of not coaching, like, he just got everybody to buy in, and they had everything sort of lined up. And like, considering how difficult it is to get that kind of thing lined up. So like, why wouldn't a couple of weeks where they're 3 wins this season? Why wouldn't it take a couple of weeks? And by the way, there's a 1-point loss to the Raiders there. There's a 2-point loss to the Commanders. This could be a 5-win team right now. They've got to win over the Chiefs. I mean, yeah, the Dolphins thing, that was ugly, but like, again, like, that's a 1-game circumstance where things kind of got off the rails. Look at the schedule coming up, man. At Buffalo, which, okay, like, obviously they're a pretty significant underdog, but like, I don't need to do my Buffalo Bills speech again. We have been bashing the bleep out of fading the Buffalo Bills for the last 5 weeks, right? We already been down the thing, right? The injuries, all that sort of thing, the Bills being overrated, et cetera, et cetera. The Bills are probably appropriately rated right now, though, again, like, they have to cover a game for us to officially anoint them as, like, not back, but like, we've found the sort of floor with them. We are down into the mid 60s, the mid to low 60s with the Bills from a rating perspective. We don't need to go back over that as much as I already did. This is about the Broncos potentially being a better than average football team going forward. Mm-hmm. And they are being rated in that 42 club, or at least sort of around that 42 club, which is below average. There's enough here that this might be a better than average team who, again, faces the Bills this week, then gets the Vikings at home. And as much as we like the Vikings this week, don't necessarily love them in Denver 2 weeks from now. Then they get the Browns at home. Who knows what version of the Browns we might get. Then they get the Texans. Then they get the Chargers. You're telling me they couldn't win those 2 games? And then it finishes off. There's a trip to Detroit, which will be tough, obviously. But then it's Patriots, Chargers again, and Raiders. Yeah. Of all those games, like, what's the one that they're definitely losing? Like the Lions? Mm-hmm. This might be, and I'm not going to say it's the start because they had their bye week and that's something. And they obviously beat the Chiefs and that's something. And they have a 2-game win streak and that's something. What if the Broncos are, to quote a famous NFL phrase, who we thought they are, or if they thought they would be, or that, who they thought they might be? It just took them 6 or 7 weeks. Mm-hmm. We're getting them plus 7.5 and plus 250, something along those lines, on a money line against a Bills team that at this point, I don't trust to beat an average-ish to maybe above average type team. Home, road, wherever you want to play it. So yes, this is absolutely Broncos plus 7.5. There was even some 8s available earlier this week, but 7.5 is good. And if you don't think that they're going to be the conclusion of the round robin underdog money line parlay this week, you are sadly mistaken. And honestly, listen, I shouldn't say I don't care what happens because they could get blown out by the Bills this week and that changes everything going forward potentially. But I think this is this team is a little, speaking of Broncos, this is a team we're going to be riding here for the next few weeks because they got some pretty nice matchups and they're not being rated like a team that might actually sneak in to the playoffs and might be one of these teams that the Jets are going to have to beat out for that final playoff spot in the AFC.
Yeah, craziness indeed. And of course, anytime you're telling me you got a decent chance of winning and I can get 7.5 points, I'm going to gladly take all of those points. But in the meantime, between time, all of these games kicking off this weekend, where can the good people find you to find the information that they so crave?
Yeah, man, celebrating and commiserating over at MRUS Authentic on Twitter. And of course, the app is The Score. Right at the top, you'll see literally the word top. Just to the left of that, there's a little tab that says betting. And that's where we hang out, man. We got obviously NBA cooking there with my guy Sam Ostry. We got the NHL going with Todd Cordell and myself. And of course, college football and the NFL, largely my department. And so everything I write is over there at The Score app. You probably have it on your phone for score checking purposes. Get in on it. Bet mode. It's where we are.
You can find me on Twitter at Shell Alexander and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And of course, thank you to everyone liking and subscribing wherever you get the podcast. And, send us messages, send us your comments and questions. We love to hear from you
Aaron
all
Rodgers
as
tickets.
always. Yes, the Aaron Rodgers tickets, definitely. That's the thing we want to hear about for sure. As I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is a Clutch Pick Sports Betting Podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.